Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Caesar Carino, your host, and we have two very special guests today. Although they're not natives of Wadsworth, they have done so much for Wadsworth in the 15 years that they have been here that people would consider them even better than natives. And that is Major Tom Grace and Major Debbie Grace from the Salvation Army. And the reason we're interviewing them today is that they are ending their 15-year stint here at Wadsworth and are going to be moving into Canton. And we're so grateful that it's going to be close by because we'll still be able to have you as part of our Wadsworth family. Now, we're going to start today with finding out not what you are, but who you are. We all know that you are in charge of the Salvation Army here in Wadsworth. We also know all of the things that you have done, although no one would be able to memorize all of those things because you have done so many things, but very few people know who you are. We'll start today first with Major Debbie, and tell us who you are. You can skip the prenatal, Debbie. Just kind of go to, your childhood, where you were born, who your parents are, and go from there.
Well, my parents were both originated from Western Pennsylvania. My dad from a small town called Corey, and my mother from Greenville, right on the Ohio border. And they actually met because of Salvation Army programs. Mm-hmm. That was how they connected originally. And they dated and were married, and they did what we used to call in the Salvation Army Corps helping. They felt called to be Salvation Army officers, so they worked at a couple of Salvation Armies. And it was during the time that they were working at the Salvation Army in Katanning, Pennsylvania, a tiny little town that we keep saying we're going to visit, but we've never visited.
I hope it's still there.
It is. There's still a Salvation Army there, actually, in Western Pennsylvania. And I was born there and lived there for just a few short months. They went and worked at the Salvation Army's Camp Allegheny outside of Pittsburgh for that summer, and then they went to the Salvation Army School for Officer Training. And back then it was only a one-year program, and when they were ordained and commissioned, just before, I was about a year and a half old, they were sent to Youngstown, Ohio, so I grew up in Northeast Ohio.
In Northeastern Ohio, but tell us who your parents were, or are rather.
Majors Paul and Norma Satterley, who are now retired, and they live in Surfside Beach, South Carolina. But they're frequent visitors to Wadsworth, and they love this community. They have property up at Lakeside on Lake Erie, up on the Marblehead Peninsula.
In the Methodist community.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a Methodist community, and they've had that property since I was about 10. There was a time when Tom's parents had property there too, so we both used to vacation there.
Now, where did you go to elementary school?
I went to kindergarten in one elementary building, and then first, second, third, fourth grade in Steubenville, Ohio. My parents were the Corps officers at the Salvation Army there. And then I went to sixth grade in another elementary building and junior high school in Coshocton, Ohio. And then I went to, I'm getting confused. In Coshocton, and then in Warren, Ohio, I went to high school, and I graduated from Warren Harding. And while I was living there was when we met. Tom's parents were transferred to Cleveland, and we met, like my parents, through Salvation Army youth programming. I went to college and graduated from Youngstown State University.
And what was your degree in Youngstown?
Business.
Business. And you got a master's degree, or rather a bachelor's degree in...
No, it's an associate's degree.
Mm-hmm. In business.
And...
But you're an ordained minister.
I am. That came later, after we had been married for some time.
I see. And what about family?
Well, I have one sister who is 3 years younger than me, and she lives in North Carolina with her family.
Is she also with the Salvation Army?
Nope. They attend, I think, right now, a non-denominational church. And it's a small town. Robbins, North Carolina is where she lives.
Never went for the big cities, obviously.
No, it's pretty rural down there, isn't it?
No, that's true. And I love those little small towns, so much more so than a big city. We just came from Boston, where my grandson graduated from college. and I could not wait to get home.
Yeah.
Just
Traffic.
too much traffic, too many
Congestion.
people. Congestion. There doesn't seem to be any kind of.
It's noisy.
Pardon me?
Noisy.
Oh, very noisy, very noisy, very noisy. And then you and Tom were married when?
We were married in 1978. We just celebrated our 37th wedding anniversary a week ago.
June 17th.
And a week ago tomorrow. And I was living in Warren at that time, and Tom was too. He was living with another family, some friends. And we were married there and had our first baby. We were still living in Warren. And then Lindsay was she wasn't a year old. We moved to Akron and worked for the Salvation Army in Akron and lived there for a year.
Was that where your father was?
No, actually it wasn't. My parents did serve there, but it was later on. And at that time, we had originally intended to enter the Salvation Army School for Officer Training. We had another baby, which made it very difficult for us to do that. So we had a change of plans. We worked for the Army. This was a mistake. We worked for the Army in New Jersey for 1 year and then came back to Ohio. We really missed Ohio. We went to work for my parents then, and that was in Dayton, Ohio, and we were there we lived in Dayton. We thought we were going to be permanent residents there, I think 8 years. Mm-hmm. So Courtney was born in Akron. We moved to New Jersey and then to Dayton with the two girls. And then while we were living in Dayton, Tom worked for the Army the entire time that we lived there. I worked for them for a couple of years, and then I went to work for a not-for-profit cancer research organization called the Hippo Cancer Research Center. For I think 5 years I worked there. I was an editor for an international journal for cell cloning, and the director of that organization had worked for many years for Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York and brought his work along with some others out to Ohio, and there was an affiliation with Wright State University at that time. So and we had Tyler while we were living there.
So we have 3 children.
We do.
We have Lindsay. And
Courtney
and Tyler. And what are their ages?
Lindsay is 34. Courtney is just turned 33, and Ty just turned 28.
Today.
No, he will
Today.
be 28. Oh, he is today.
So I asked you instead of Tom because
Yeah.
you would know.
No,
Today's the
probably I would
23rd.
know.
You would know as well.
Yes, happy birthday, Tyler.
Yeah,
Right.
today's time.
Today's his birthday?
Yes.
Oh, how wonderful. Today is his birthday. He's 28 years old today.
Correct.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, I have known you since you came to Wadsworth, and the first time that I've known anything about you.
Wow.
Because everyone has been so busy that all we do
Yeah.
is to know who the person is while we're still working with that individual. And I've been on the board now, what, 10 years, 12, something like that?
Yeah, yes.
And have really enjoyed that relationship with the Army. Tom's your turn, and I suspect that you don't have too many blanks to fill in, but you do have to talk about what you did as a young child,
Sure.
because you didn't go to the same school she did.
No,
And,
and
you didn't
actually,
have the same parents as she did.
No,
so
no.
why don't you start there?
Thank goodness.
yeah, thank
Right.
goodness. I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My parents were living in Philadelphia. My mom worked for the hospital that I was born in, Germantown Hospital, and she was in the insurance department in that hospital. And my dad was working for a company called Teleflex, which was a company that actually manufactured parts for NASA for rocket engines. He was in the accounting department there. When I was about 8, 9, my parents felt a call into Salvation Army ministry. We had been a part of the Salvation Army as a family. They had, and I was really, like Deb, born into the Salvation Army. So they attended the Salvation Army Seminary in Bronx, New York, for a year. At that time it was a 2-year program, but the administration of the Army decided that 1 year would be good enough for them. So they They were sent out after their first year to Buffalo, New York, a small part of Buffalo, the Kensington area. We were there for a year, and then even though they only went for a year to the seminary, they went back after that first year to be commissioned and ordained as Salvation Army officers, and we were appointed to Elmira, New York. From there, we went to Spring Valley, New York, where they started the work of the Army in Spring Valley, New York. From Spring Valley, they were sent to Cleveland, and that's where life began for me, really. If we were to talk about the schools that I went to, we would take all of your show, because in the 12 years that it took me to graduate, I went to 11 schools. So
no kidding.
Yes, just the way that it worked out in the communities that we were in. But I am a graduate of Shaker Heights High School outside of Cleveland. At that time, my father was the assistant financial officer for this Neosa division of the Northeast Ohio division of the Salvation Army. There's some discussion as to how Deb and I met. Now,
we're going to take her side of the story, so whatever you say, we're not going to accept.
Yeah. It's actually a pretty interesting story. I was working at our summer camp, which is just outside of Carrollton, Ohio at that time, and I got a postcard from somebody named Debbie from Hawaii. I didn't know who it was. She says I did, but I didn't know who it was.
It makes him feel good to have his version heard.
I still have the postcard.
Did you find it yesterday?
Not yet, not yet. But that's really, Deb is correct. We really met through Salvation Army youth activities, playing in a band together, the brass band that the Army had.
What did you play?
At that time I was playing trombone. I still play a little trombone. I also play some euphonium and mainly most of the brass instruments. Debbie plays as well. She plays the E-flat alto horn.
You play alto horn, wow.
And then it's kind of a dying art in the Salvation Army, but Deb also plays a tambourine. And the Army has a rich history of women, particularly women, playing what they call timbral drills to brass music in the Salvation Army, and Deb played.
I can remember years ago when the Salvation Army women officers would stand on the corner at Christmas time. They would always have the tambourine going.
Yeah. So we met, and then from actually I moved to Warren, Ohio in 1977 because my parents were transferred to Portland, Maine. And then Deb and I were married in 1978, and then the adventure began.
The adventure began, that's right. Well, that also is the most interesting kind of story that we have never heard here in Wadsworth. I suspect that almost no one in Wadsworth knows that full story. Now we have it on tape, and it's going to be worldwide because this goes worldwide.
Yeah.
It's also going to be in the time capsule. Because you were here during the time capsule. As a matter of fact, you were very prominent during our 200th anniversary, and we want to make sure that we have that recorded. Now that we know who you are, now we need to know a little bit about where you have been in terms of your own, shall we say, officership?
Sure, that's exactly correct. We were commissioned as Salvation Army officers and ordained in 1992.
And started as a lieutenant, is that right?
That's correct,
Right.
and if I were to check dates, I think it would be just about last week.
June 14th.
June 14th,
Right.
that we
Flag
celebrate
Day.
our 23rd year as Salvation Army officers. We were commissioned and ordained and sent to Worcester, Ohio as our first appointment. And Deb could fill you in on Worcester.
What happened at Worcester?
Well, Worcester was very interesting. It's a beautiful little town, so close by here. We enjoyed our work in Worcester. The Salvation Army has an emergency shelter there, so it was very demanding work. And the Army was relatively new to Worcester at that time in the form of having a corps and corps officers. There had been services offered there for many, many years, but the Salvation Army decided to plant a full Salvation Army church and offer complete services there, and we were only the second officers there. So when we arrived, the Army had only been open three years, correct? 3 years. And so it was still very, very new. There was still a lot of work to be done, I think, community work. And probably that was one of the places we really cut our teeth in learning to and I think some of this is learned from our parents, but when you are transient, such as we are in the Army.
I would say so. 11 times, 11
Yeah,
schools in 12 years. Wow.
You have to make a decision that wherever you are is home, and we've always felt very strongly about that. We had children, and we wanted them to have a sense of belonging. So when we move into a community, our philosophy is we move in and we get to know that community,
Well,
meet
you
the
surely
people,
did.
learn what makes that community unique, and what are the really good things about that community. Plant some roots, get involved. So we've always participated in events taking place, fundraising events, community events, being a part of what's going on in the downtown, sporting events. We've always found our kids were very athletic, and Tom was an athlete growing up. He left that part out. He was a star shortstop for a state championship baseball team at Shaker
Wow,
Heights.
really? No kidding. You still play baseball?
No.
Well, that
His
took
last
That's a
forever.
short answer.
last attempt at softball went very
You
poorly.
seem, you seem to be vacillating. You're talking this way and that. What do you mean by just no?
I'm old. I took up the game of golf very briefly at 16 and then got very serious about it in my late 20s. And I play a lot of golf. We're a family that plays golf, actually, which is, we only have one of our children who does not play, and I have full intention of teaching all of my grandchildren how to play, along with their father. And so I just kind of gave it up after that. I played a lot of slow pitch softball for a while, and then my body caught up with me. So golf, all I have to do is get out of the cart and swing.
Your
and get
age
back.
caught up with your body.
All I have to do is get out of the cart and swing and get back out in back in the
They're all
cart.
done.
So,
Now, you mentioned one of those words there that begets the response, grandchildren. And we'll turn that over to Debbie because
Sure.
you'll forget their names.
Oh, we have 4 grandchildren
Yeah.
that we just love dearly. They make our hearts go pitter patter, literally. Tatum, who is 16, and she will
Beautiful
be.
girl.
She
thank
is.
you.
She's very gifted, very compassionate, and she will be can you believe it, a junior at Wadsworth High School this year. She's very gifted in sacred dance, mime, so she's really been a real asset in worship. And she's involved in Divisional Salvation Army activities, the kind of programs that we mentioned through which we met and my parents met. Then this summer she's working at Camp Neosa,
Right.
the Salvation Army's residential camp down on Leesville Lake in Carroll County. She has a brother, Xavier, who is 11, and he is going to be in 6th grade this year at CIS, and he's a character.
Let's tell us what CIS means, because 50 years from now they won't know.
Central Intermediate School,
Right.
which is the 5-6 grade building here in Wadsworth currently. He's kind of, he looks a lot like Tom. We call him Mini-Me sometimes.
Mini-me, mini-me.
Mini-Me.
Now, those are the 4 grandchildren.
Those are two.
Two.
Those 2 live here in Wadsworth, and they belong to our daughter Courtney. The other 2 live in Parma Heights, but they're in Wadsworth a lot, and that's because they are Lindsay and her husband Chris's daughters. And actually, they're in town today.
For the parade.
They're going to be here for the parade tonight. They are Gracie and Delaney, and they are 7 and 5. And Gracie is the one who's 7, and Delaney is 5, and they are just precious. They are characters. They are very different in personality. Gracie is playing
Slow pitch softball.
is it softball this summer, and she's just she loves it. She's batting
Lead off.
Lead off, yeah. We went up to watch her play the other night. She's really good at the plate, and Delaney is inspired by music.
Yeah, she's a dancer.
She's
Out
a
of
dancer.
curiosity,
And,
where did they get the name Gracie?
well, her name is Gracie Jean Kircher, and she originally was going to be Grace, obviously after our last name, and Jean is after my mother. That's my mother's middle name. Her name is Norma Jean, and they wanted to honor my mom. My mom, Lindsay is very close to my parents, and So it was a real tribute. And anyway, Gracie Jean sounded better than Grace Jean. Those two, it just
Gracie
sounded
Jean.
kind of staccato.
I like that.
Yeah.
But it's really symbolic.
It is very.
The fact is that they bring in this whole culture of the Graces into this little girl. And I'm going to ask a question about that in a few minutes, but right now, how about continuing with where else you were? You were in Worcester.
We went from Worcester to the west side of Cleveland. It's called the Cleveland West Park Corps of the Salvation Army in the West Park area. We served about 5 years there and very much enjoyed our time there. The only the only difference from most of our appointments while serving in Cleveland, that's first of all, Cleveland is such a large city.
Yeah.
It's also our headquarters is in Cleveland, so we didn't get an opportunity to do as much community work as we would have liked to have done. But we had a large senior program, a large congregation, and then a lot of youth activities there. After we were finished in West Park, the Army asked us to plant or establish the work of the Salvation Army in Strongsville, Ohio. And so it was another one of those short moves where we moved from Middleburg Heights to Strongsville. Yeah, and we were just about getting the work established in terms of a core ministry when the officers who were here in Wadsworth at the time had to go on sick leave.
And those were the Longs?
The Longs, that's correct.
Their first and last name, first names of
Gary and Shirley Long.
Right.
And
lovely people.
Yeah. So what happened was that because we were the most expendable in the division in terms of not having a facility, just getting things going, they asked us to come down here occasionally and support the staff that was here. They asked us to drop in for some programs. Deb was leading the ladies ministry, and actually this is when we first met Caesar. They also asked us to run the Christmas effort.
That's right.
And I remember the first time we met was in our humble little building preparing for our kettle kickoff. And so by that time, Caesar, we had absolutely fallen in love with Wadsworth. And this is a very rare happening in the Army. Our boss at the time asked if we would like to stay in Wadsworth. And there was not even much discussion about it. We certainly agreed. And then we commuted from Strongsville area for about 6 months so that our son could finish school.
And what year was that?
2000.
2000.
2000 into 2001.
Right.
It was September when we started making the commute part-time, doing worship and going through that first Christmas. And then January, we were officially appointed, January 2001, but we really didn't move until June.
The way that I remember it, I was mayor at the time,
Right.
and I had become mayor on January 1st. And it was September. We were having a program at the Methodist Church, and I forgot what the program was, and the Longs were there. They were captains, were they?
Majors.
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 That's right. The Majors were both there, and we chatted and talked, and afterwards, and a whole coterie of people. When we said goodbye, we did not realize that was it. The following day, they were gone.
Right, right.
So the sick leave or whatever it was. And then the next thing I know, we had these two new people coming in, and I was a little confused. I said, what happened here? But then we became very, very close very quickly.
Right.
I remember hosting you in the mayor's office several times because we wanted to help you get started and do anything we possibly could.
Right.
And then from that time on, there's going to be a history here that we would like to share.
Sure.
We're going to run out of time, but we're going to have to share it because that's the part that we really would like to have for our people in 2064 when they read this in 2064.
We should be retired by then, I think.
Pardon me?
We should be retired by then.
I'm planning to be here. I'll be 134 years old, but I'm planning to be here. I'm 85 now, almost 85, and I plan to be here at that time. We need to skip over a couple of things,
Sure.
otherwise we will run out of time. But how about starting with when you came to Wadsworth, just one little thing like living conditions, and you didn't have a house.
Deb, she's a pro at telling that story.
Well, the Salvation Army provides our home because, again, I'm using that word, that transient nature. You can understand how difficult it would be to purchase a home and sell a home every time you moved. So the Army provides, and they call it a quarters, going along with that military lingo. So the quarters that was here was on, was it South Park?
North Park.
North Park.
North Park.
And it was 1,200 square feet.
Very, very small house.
Very small. It was a lovely little home and I said to Tom, the lot was just beautiful. I love the backyard. But it was only 1,200 square feet. It literally had 2 beds in it. We moved here with our entire family, which at that time included Tom's father, who had had a stroke and was very ill, and our first grandchild. So we moved here with 7 people. Keep in mind that when we drive out, it's going to be the 2 of us.
Right.
So that's a very traumatic experience, leaving for the first time without any of our family when we move. So we had that 6 months, we had time to get that home ready to sell and to find something that would be more accommodating to a family. And so that gave us time to do that. And we looked and looked and looked and looked, and finally, with Jan Nelson's help, found the home that we've been living in all of these years, which we just love.
Tell us where that is.
It's in the meadows of Wintergreen on Creekview Circle, 232 Creekview Circle. It was brand new when we moved in, probably the only time we'll experience moving into a new home.
Beautiful home.
Yes.
It's a beautiful home. We just love it, and we're trying to make sure it's prepared very nicely for the lieutenants who are coming in.
Now that means that, pardon me, the quarters includes all of the furniture and everything?
That's correct.
Furnishings, major appliances, linens. So you have your own things, and we do have some furniture that's ours, just to go in and make it your own home. One of the things that we always practice is getting some of our family photos and some of our artwork on the walls very quickly. Some.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Some means I like that a lot more than Tom does.
What she means, Caesar, is that for the first 3.5 years that we're in Canton, I'll be hanging photos and pictures.
Photos and pictures.
My wife loves wall hangings, and I do too. Especially wall hangings that have some sentimental value. So that's one of the jobs that I get when we get into our new home in Canton.
One of the jobs.
Yeah. The 2 automobiles stay as well. I mean, the Army really owns all of that, and so that the new officers coming in, Lieutenant and Mrs. Baggs, who will be following us.
Oh, she's not a bag?
Lieutenant.
She's not a lieutenant?
She is.
You said Lieutenant and Mrs. You're going back to the
Sorry,
old language.
that's the old language in the Army.
Lieutenants Beth and Mark Baggs.
Beth and Mark Baggs will be following us. They're coming out of our seminary. Their second career, actually. He was a Nazarene minister at one time, and this is a second career for them. So,
what was she?
I don't know.
We don't really know them.
We don't really know them, and we're excited for their opportunities here. We really are.
Well, we're looking forward to that in a certain sense, simply because it preserves the integrity of the Army by having new people come in.
Right.
Well, the rest of us get old, obviously, but everyone's going to miss both of you. Obviously, we can't even talk about that, or we probably get emotional about it. However, now, when you came to Wadsworth, there were probably 3 or 4 major challenges. What were the major challenges that you had to face, and how did you address them? And what is the resolution?
I would say our first immediate challenge was that the Army was not as engaged with the community as it should have been. We found that there was really limited access to the Army for the community. There were a number of reasons for that. Certainly one of the largest reasons is resources. That's a challenge. So resources were a challenge as well, but But having the Army connected with the community was one of the largest challenges that we faced. And Caesar, you were, I know you're doing this show, but you were very instrumental in the early beginnings of our time here in terms of getting that connection established.
Endorsing the Army?
Endorsing the Army, you tell the Army story better than we do here in Wadsworth, frankly. Because you yourself your family was a recipient of the Army over the years. And
years ago, many
Yes.
during the Depression, everyone was.
Exactly, and so you opened a lot of doors for us. In fact, Caesar, one of our distribution program, food distribution program at Christmas, is located in a place that you made possible for us at the old Barefoot Soul, now Goldsmith and Angleton. You made a phone call, and 2 days later we had a yes, and so that still happens there. And so our challenge, biggest challenge initially was getting connected to the community. And then I think our second biggest challenge, Caesar, was that we had to offer the kind of programming and services that lined up with what the community needed. And so we expanded the social services right away. We expanded the number of hours that we were available to the community. We went from really part-time to full-time immediately. And then the second thing that we did not long into our stay here, and this is a philosophy that Deb and I share, we believe very strongly that while we have generation after generation after generation of some families on our welfare rolls, that while we'll still do that kind of service, we need to be doing something that may interrupt that process or interrupt that happening for the next generations. And we believe very strongly that education is the way to do that. So historically, when I was in Dayton, I had the privilege of starting the very first learning center in the Salvation Army in the country. Yes. And
I'm surprised that no one had thought of that before.
Well, that was...
It was that the old story about, give a man a fish.
Right.
Yes.
Eats for a day, give a man, or
Right.
teach him how to fish, he
Right.
eats forever.
For a lifetime.
And the reason that it started is even back then, we had a Salvation Army board member in Dayton who had a belief that the Army should be doing something in the education field. She was on staff at Sinclair University at one time in Dayton. She was very artsy. Carolyn, I can't remember Carolyn's last name now, but she was, I have to tell you, Caesar, she was the kind of person that my wife would tell you that I would have a hard time with, okay? Because I don't know how to explain it other than to say.
You better explain it.
I will explain it, okay. Well, let me say it this way.
She talked a lot.
She talked a lot, for one thing, yes. And she was aggressive. She was aggressive in her speech, and I don't mean anything untoward, but she was aggressive. She'd get in your face, kind of talk to you.
Now, if you could be a little bit more specific, probably one word would take care of the whole thing, but you're not allowed to say that word on this program.
No, I'm not. Not at all. But she pulled me aside one day off of the basketball court. I was coaching some kids, and I can still remember her walking across the gym floor, her heels clicking on the gym floor, which got on my nerves too.
Because the gym floor.
Yeah,
it was hardwood.
And she pulled me aside, and I said, "Carolyn, I'm in the middle of something." She said, "Well, I'm going to have to leave pretty soon, so I need 5 minutes of your time. So could you stop the game, or at a timeout, could you talk to me?"
I'm getting the picture.
And that's exactly what happened. And so she planted the seed in me.
Yes.
And so I felt it was better for my own existence to follow her wishes. And
God works in mysterious
He does.
ways.
But somewhere deep inside of you, didn't you think that if someone like Carolyn had entered your life when you were younger, it would have been life-changing for you? Because Tom was smart, but he was not a good student. He didn't really care. And she was the kind of person who could plant in you a desire to be better.
Right, exactly.
That's what she had. And that really motivated you then.
It did.
When you really heard her out, it motivated you. And that program became so successful. It was a model for the Salvation Army all over the eastern United States.
Mhm.
And so here we sit, that was 1983, 84.
In fact,
how many years later?
we received requests. We got phone calls from California and Texas and other Salvation Armies
Who wanted to replicate
the program. So we have always believed that education. Now you come into Wadsworth, which has, in my opinion, one of the best school systems in the country. It's certainly the finest school system that I have ever been connected to.
Yes.
They educate children well.
Mm-hmm.
There are always children in the process for whatever reason. It may be because parents don't care. It may be because they don't learn in a traditional way. That becomes a challenge. And I went to Chuck Parsons at that time, who was
Tell us who Chuck Parsons was.
superintendent of the schools when we arrived. And this community knows, most of this community knows Chuck far better than I do, but we did get a chance to know him well. And I pitched the idea to him, and I'll remember this forever. He said to me, "You just tell me what you need."
That's Chuck. It's exactly what Chuck would say.
Yep.
He walked through that whole process right beside us.
Right.
And made it possible, really, I think, for this program that now has blossomed into multiple programs
Exactly.
to be successful.
But now
Describe the program briefly.
sure, go ahead.
Well, the Learning Center is an after-school tutoring program for students in the Wadsworth City Schools who have a referral because they are having some difficulties in the classroom. They're not meeting academic standards, and sometimes it's social and behavioral issues as well. And oftentimes the root of that may be something completely different, but their failure in school or lack of success in school is one of the symptoms of what's going on. So we offer this program. It currently has a census of 20. We can only accommodate 20 students, but they come from school either walking or on the bus. They're brought to the Army Center, which currently in 2015 is housed in the City Schools Administration Building.
Which goes by the name we all know.
Yeah, Chuck the Parsons.
Yes.
Charles
Parsons Administration Building.
That's correct.
So how appropriate is that?
I think I know the answer to this question, but you said that for the public schools, but if Sacred Heart had a student, that person could come to as well, just as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
They would follow the same format. They would need a referral from either a classroom teacher or from an administrator or someone in the guidance
And
staff.
who runs that program?
That would be our oldest daughter, Lindsay Kircher.
Who is a certified
teacher. She's a graduate of Muskingum College. It was college, now it's a university.
And there's some connections in
Some
Wadsworth.
Wadsworth connections to
That's
Muskingum.
The judge is a graduate, and others.
We have a lot of.
That's right.
We have a lot of Muskingum graduates here in Wadsworth.
And she chose to go there because the desire of her heart was to be a teacher, and their program was highly commended. They had an excellent program for teaching. So when she
Didn't hurt that they recruited her to play basketball either.
Well,
she played basketball there.
that helped in terms of the money.
Yeah.
No, it was a Division III, so there were no scholarships.
No scholarships for
Just
Division
grants and
III,
aid.
That's right.
Grants
Yes.
and aid.
Well, you know,
But,
I've been in education all my life and actually trained teachers. And I have, and this is for parents to hear, and one of these days I might even tell Lindsay, but she has never failed to impress me as being a person of passion for teaching.
Yes.
I mean, she's not a teacher. She is a person of passion for teaching.
Right.
Yes.
That's correct, Caesar.
And she does that at such a, I mean,
She
She
takes
is-
without a chalkboard, without a piece of chalk, without absolutely a book, she could teach.
well,
Yes.
exactly, and in significant ways, she's much like her mother. Her mother has great passion for the things that we're involved in, and she's a
Now,
real mix
this
of
is
the
her
two
mother
of us.
right here, right?
That's correct.
You can point to her.
That's all right. I don't want her to know I'm complimenting her. Yeah, she
she
is.
tempers her passion and compassion with discipline.
Correct. Yeah.
So she lays out the expectations for the students very clearly, but they also know that they're loved.
Well, she can discipline actually, but this is one of the things that I probably shouldn't take the time to do this because we don't have much time left, but her form of discipline is that her aura disciplines. She doesn't have to say a word.
No, she's
that comes
good.
probably from her mom as well.
Right, right. Well, she's a real mix of the two of us, and
she's very creative.
She's
too.
very creative. So she leads that program, the Learning Center, which is elementary school age. About 6 or 7 years ago, I'm losing track of time, we were approached by the middle school, Roger Wright at that time.
Roger Wright was the principal of the middle school.
Was it before Roger? It was, no, I'm sorry, it was
Brian.
Brian.
Was still
Brian Williams.
Yes.
It was that the transition happened.
To be a participant in a best practices program called the CARE Team. And very briefly, the CARE Team, the plan of the CARE Team is to identify the most at-risk children in the middle school and bring a team of providers to the table from various disciplines. So the CARE Team is comprised of...
You're right, Teen Scene was under Brian and CARE Team was under Roger.
You did get that on film that I was right. I appreciate that.
We started after school programming there under
Yeah,
Brian Williams,
yeah,
but CARE Team actually.
Let me just say this one thing. Tom was right.
And it's in a time capsule.
Yes, I know. And anyway, some of the disciplines that are brought to the table would be behavioral health, it would be, frankly, the juvenile court system and the counselors from the schools. At the time it started, the hospital was represented, and then the Army was at the table. Over the years, Caesar, really the Army has become the driver of the CARE Team now. And what happens there is that those children are identified and the team refers by the team to an after-school program that we do there. Education, it's not just education though, there are character building programs.
Therapeutic activities.
And we have a staff person in the school who is there part of the day, but then after school, and her job is really to be the family engagement specialist. She engages with the families of these children and also works with the children as well. So Lindsay oversees that program, their staff.
And we have a tutor.
And we have a tutor there, and we have a staff there. And then in addition to the education programs, well, I should say that it is the plan to move the CARE Team program into the intermediate school. We've applied for a grant in addition to what's going on.
To expand it.
And then we have a GED program, and we have a GED coordinator.
Let's talk about the GED program and tell us what the initials are in case it isn't here in 2064. General education.
Diploma.
Yes, it's diploma.
Equivalency.
The equivalency diploma for those who have not graduated from high school.
The equivalency, that's that education. The equivalency, I'm sorry.
And so we have a GED coordinator. The program is free. There's been some changes over the last couple of years. The test is now all done on computer.
And very expensive.
And very expensive. And we've worked creatively, I think, with a couple of individuals to help with that as well. But so now we have an education program that really goes from elementary school. We kind of jump over high school. And I do believe that in the future there may be some, well, it would have been our plan in the future to even have something available to high school students.
Well, and we do have a brand new program.
Correct.
That is available to any student. And that is a new program that just started this spring, and it's a collaboration with Cornerstone Wellness, Cornerstone Psychological Services in Medina. And we call it WOW, Wellness of Wadsworth. And really our goal is for the young people that we're working with to be well holistically. So this program addresses some behavioral and mental health issues for students, again, who have a referral from either our staff at the Salvation Army or Wadsworth City School staff who are struggling with some personal issues, maybe a family issue or some kind of behavioral issues, and they really need the attention, yes, of a counselor, and as you well know, our state, there were some serious cuts at the state level quite a number of years ago
Right in the
with
half.
mental health
Right.
services. And the services that were available in Wadsworth were withdrawn. And obviously, just a month or so ago, we had a levy on the ballot that would have provided some of those services again, and that levy failed, which really makes our program all the more needed and necessary in the community. So if a student gets a referral and it's an issue that they can't access service in Medina either because of, or in some, we have a lot of families going into Summit County for care right now. They can bring their child to the Salvation Army, and the counseling actually takes place in our sanctuary right now. Obviously, our building is very small and we don't have a lot of space.
And then we have a couple more minutes left,
Okay.
a few more minutes left, and we're probably going to have to talk about that other challenge. What is that challenge
The
about?
facility challenge.
Facility. Okay,
There's
now
no
what are we doing
question
about that,
it.
and how are we addressing it?
We are in the process of seeking Army approval to buy the old freshwater church,
And tell us where that is geographically.
185 Humboldt Street.
185 Humboldt
It's
Street.
at the end of Humboldt, right next to the park.
That's correct.
And tell us where we are right now geographically. We are
On College Street.
about a mile and a quarter west of the square of
The
Wadsworth,
square, right.
on the south side of the road.
That's correct.
And give us another landmark so that in case the
Be
building is
close to the convenience store and
Stop and go.
the stop and go,
Catty-corner.
catty corner from the stop and go.
The reason we have to do this is so many things are gone
Right.
Yes.
over a period of time. As a matter of fact, from the 175th anniversary to the 200th, not one of the schools that
Wow.
we had in Wadsworth is
Yeah.
still
Wow.
standing,
Correct.
except the junior high school.
Yeah.
Well,
the-
we sit
Yeah.
between Westgate and Westview.
right, okay, that'll be helpful.
Yeah, in
Yes.
fact, our tenure here, most of the schools were rebuilt in
Right.
our tenure
That's
here. So.
absolutely,
Yes.
2000.
So the building is a challenge. We are certainly accepting any contributions towards the capital development of the Army. They can just write a check and put capital development, because after we purchase, there will be some renovations that are needed as well. But what that does for us, frankly, is we go from multiple locations to one location with all of our programs under one roof, and that's necessary at this point because of the size of the programs. Wadsworth, when we walked in here, had a budget of just a very $300,000, and we're approaching the $900,000 annually now.
I'm surprised that you can do it with that. As
Right.
a matter of fact, you probably are
It's
a
on
struggle.
shoestring.
Exactly.
It's a struggle.
It's a struggle. And-
Particularly through the spring and summer months. Giving always is greatly increased over the holidays, and
Well,
during the winter months.
It will be of interest to the people in 2064 to know that you suffered through 6 years of a fairly substantial recession.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Of course, and that
Absolutely.
meant two things. Number one, that your income was down,
Right.
and that your
Right.
needs were up.
Yeah,
That's
we call
correct.
it the double whammy. Yeah, we
And
call it.
that's not the way it's supposed to be.
No,
And we continued on faith to offer more services during that time too. There were a couple of years where there was a freeze on wages, and our employees stuck with us through
Right.
some tough times.
Right,
But
right.
that's one of the keys. The people who work with us, our volunteers and our employees, are all with us for the very same
Right.
reason that we're there, and that's because God places a desire in our heart to serve.
How many volunteers do you think you might have?
Oh, I just looked at. I was looking at the minutes from the Women's Auxiliary meeting last night, and from October to May, there were 1,652 volunteer hours just from the Women's Auxiliary. Just from the Women's Auxiliary. I would say that Deb does our stats. I'd say we're in the neighborhood of 13,000 to 15,000 volunteer hours a year. And if
that
you
sounds about right.
if you put a minimum wage on that,
Oh,
and we're not, and here's the reality: the kinds of services that we're getting from our volunteers are not minimum wage jobs.
No,
We're
they're
talking
not, no.
about, in some cases, administrative, just really across the board. So
well, it's not, obviously, this is something that you may or may not want to talk about. However, it is in the newspaper that one of your volunteers just gave a house to you.
That's correct. That's
And
correct.
that's not what you call minimum wage.
No, and that house is going to make it possible for the new facility. We have actually 3 pieces of property that are contiguous to our building and contiguous to our building, and they'll be sold. Speaking is becoming difficult for me these last few days because that's all I'm doing is speaking. But
You do well, though.
yeah, they'll be sold, and I would say generate pretty close to the purchase price of the church. We would hope anyway. But again, the renovations will be needed. But yes, those are the kinds of people. You know, Caesar, here's the reality. The Wadsworth Salvation Army has never been Tom and Debbie Grace. The Wadsworth Salvation Army has been the community of Wadsworth. And in all of our appointments, and I'm not just talking about as officers, but as employees, and growing up in the Army, we have never been exposed. We have never had the opportunity to have that kind of involvement. This is a community where your donors walk in the door and drop off a check. This is a community where board members or auxiliary members walk in only to say hi and how you doing.
Do you need anything?
Do you need anything? The Salvation Army is Wadsworth. It would
What
not
can I
function.
do to help?
The Army would not function were it not for the kind of people that live in this community.
Well, that's very nice of you to say, but you have an automobile. Where does it go without the driver?
Well, I appreciate that, Caesar. I appreciate that. And Debbie and I have very different gifts. We, after 24 years of starting to figure it out, that this is where Tom stays out of, and this is where Deb stays out of, or whatever. And we work well together. You know, it is a challenge to work together and to live together.
Well,
it really
you know,
is.
that has crossed my mind time and time again.
Right.
Because not only are you living together and working together, but under almost, well, not, I don't know about when you're living together or whether this is adverse, but always under adverse situations. I mean, there's no such thing as a grand old party coming over here and having something nice for you. I mean, you're picking somebody up off the street.
Right.
And this poor family doesn't have any food. This family doesn't have any love in their family. And you're doing all of those kinds of things. So every inch of your effort is directed towards something which is not negative, but it's very challenging.
Right.
And the two of you do it 24/7. I mean, you've invented 24/7.
Well, here's part of the issue is in the age of Facebook and the age of email,
Yes.
our email addresses are on our website, and so it's not uncommon, as we're laying down in bed at night to hear our cell phones ringing our email, and it's somebody who's in need. Requests for services.
Yeah.
Now we don't act on them at 11 o'clock at night because we have
would,
a program. We have an individual who handles that. But the reality is that, yes, it is. And I would say that those challenges as we go into the future for any Salvation Army officer are only going to get greater. They just are. That's what's going on right now.
The city of Wadsworth owes both of you a tremendous amount of respect as well as a tremendous amount of adulation. You talk about the fact that the Army is Wadsworth, Wadsworth is the Army, and so forth. Taking nothing away from any of the previous people who were here, because I'm sure that they had challenges that they were trying to overcome and they did not have the opportunity to complete it the way they wanted to. But take that, let's just give them that benefit of the doubt. I've been here for 85 years, almost 85 years, soon will be 85 years. And I've watched the Army work from the time that I was a little boy, because during the Depression, they were out all of the time. And there were usually 2 or 3 Army-clad people ringing a bell because everyone needed help during the Depression. Everyone needed help during the Depression. I mean, there was no food. There were families that did not have so much as a glass of water in their house. They were doing this all the time. And that was a tremendous challenge. However, this is the first time in my memory of Wadsworth where the Army has not only become recognized, but has become a focal point of the entire city. And we take that, shall we, let me put it a different way so that it doesn't sound as if I'm being too melodramatic here. But we take that as the effort that both the two of you have put into making it happen.
Okay.
None of these things happens without someone making it happen. You did that.
Thank you.
So
Caesar.
when you leave here, you are not really going to be leaving because what you have done here is going to be remaining here
No.
simply because you made it so strong that it won't leave here. So
Thank
we
you,
have a
Caesar.
couple seconds left, and we'll start with you, Tom, and then we'll let Debbie have the last word. How's that?
It's
What would you like to say to
normal.
Wadsworth as you leave?
Well, I'll tell you what I want to say to Wadsworth is certainly thank you for accepting us. Thank you for not only accepting us, but willing to enter into relationship with us. Thank you for supporting us in such a powerful, wonderful way. Thank you for allowing this to be our home. This is the longest place that either one of us have ever lived in our lives.
Well, you know, when you retire, you can't come back here, you know.
Right, but there's no beach in Wadsworth, and so.
Oh.
But we'll come back. Believe me, we'll come back. We have
Right.
children here and grandchildren here, and we'll be sneaking in to see them, and so. But I just want to say thank you to Wadsworth. Thank you to folks like yourself, Caesar, who, who see not just what the Army is today, but there are people in this community who see what the Army could be tomorrow and the next day and the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say thank you for that.
Okay, now Debbie, you get the last word. You have less than a minute.
We love Wadsworth,
Right.
and Wadsworth is people.
Right.
It's not a place, it's the people, and we love living here.
Well,
It's a hard place to leave.
it will be.
And Tom and I were talking with some of the auxiliary members last night, and one of the things that we said that we felt is that when we sit back when we're 85 and look over the course of our life, where does our heart land in our thoughts? And it
Right.
will be here.
It'll be
It
here.
was.
There's no question.
That's right.
Well,
It's permanently imprinted on us.
two of the words that you spoke are the ones that Wadsworth wants to give back to you. Number one, thank you, and number two, we love you.
Thank you, Caesar.
Thank you.
Our time is up, unfortunately, but we wish you the very, very best in your new venture in Canton.
Thank you, Caesar.